Hello, this is an assessment for restoration of a Bechstein Model L that's 170 centimetres long, made in 1974. Now the main work we've been requested to do here is to repolish, basically to strip off the polyester, which as you can see here is damaged slightly, but you can see it's very faded. So some parts are faded and some aren't. So obviously that's been kept closed and in a very light area, and that's been obviously the whole piano has been closed. The front part of the top lid's faded. It's obviously that's probably been exposed to light, and then this not so much. So, but the only solution really is to strip it, because you can't really body up parts of a polyester piano. You possibly could if it was French polish, but we would normally re-French polish if it was a French polish piano anyway, if it was that faded. But so just look around it quickly, but you can see that it varies, so that side is quite light as well. So we would have to strip that. So the problem with stripping polyester, you don't really know how much it's got into the grain of the wood. So it's a bit of an unknown really until it's stripped off. Can't really be sure, and whether it will need re-veneering, in other words, whether the veneer is suitable for French polishing over. There's some cracks here, and around the other side there were cracks as well. There's a crack in the top of this leg, so obviously we've got to French polish the piano, and we'll have to see how we can whether we can manage to do that without having to re-veneer it. Looking at the piano itself, very low pedals, as we've mentioned many times on Bechstein. Very often they have low pedals on grands, which is very useful because you can then put caster cups under the casters and still the pedals won't be too high. And the leg room's 62.5 I think centimetres tall, so that's, say, about 1 centimetre better than most pianos. The inside of the piano is in generally good condition. The tuning pins are reasonably tight. It's very flat. I think it's about 4/3. There's some damp got into the piano. You can see little specks, I think, of some sort of mould there, and the hammers too. We can look at those in a minute. The strings are slightly dirty. If you do refinish the outside of the piano, obviously it will show up the inside as not being so pristine as it looks reasonable at the moment. There's a crack on the soundboard there. So that's obviously cosmetic. It's not a crack in the wood, though. There's one that seems to have closed up here. I think that is pranks drawing together, so that's another sign of slight dampness at some stage. If we did redo the whole piano, then we'd check the soundboard as well. So we could restring this piano, though tone-wise doesn't really need it. Though the tuning pins aren't as tight as they were when they were new. So it is a possibility to do that. I don't think it will improve the tone too much. The hammers are going to improve the tone. We'll look at the hammers in a minute if we work on them. Just have a quick listen to the tone. It's a bit thin sounding, and here it's very dull sounding. But the hammers are very soft. Here they're particularly soft, and obviously you might like a soft sound, but you also need to get a bit of punch for certain types of music. But going down the bass, a nice tenor sound. Again, the hammers are letting it down, and also when it's pitch raised it will sound slightly better. Good break point. Very well designed pianos, the Model L Bechstein. So good tone for the length of the piano. Good tone throughout. Would be slightly improved possibly by replacing bass strings. These are currently original tuning pins, slightly loose on my standard medium star, so that shows they're original. If you restring, you obviously put bigger pins in, possibly slightly longer ones too, but certainly bigger ones, otherwise they're not going to hold because you'll open the hole up. But the strings are good. Tuning pins very slightly looser than they were when they were new, so that's a decision to make. Now the action needs some regulation. I've regulated the set-offs and drop screw and spring. I'll show you what that looks like now. This is the middle C is the right hand one here, and you'll see that it goes further towards the string than the B does. So if we play B, it sets off earlier than C, which is setting off as late as is comfortable really. It must work properly obviously. So, and then the drop screw, which I'll show you in a minute, we look at them as they come to rest. C comes to rest a bit higher up, and the spring, if you watch this one, this is B. If I release the key, nothing happens. If if I release the key on C, it straps up. And now it mustn't go up so that it hits the string again, and also mustn't feel in the too strong in the finger either. So that was regulation of set off. Spring, this is drop screw here, and the spring, if you look at the screw at the back there, you can see the screw to adjust the spring to make it more tense. So if we look at the notes again, so there's B. If I release it, nothing happens. We watch the two setting off together, so it's B and C, note 40, 39 and 40, and you can see the C goes quite along. It makes it much better for playing softer. You can't really play so soft really gently unless it's regulated properly. So, and if we look at two put together, the right hand one C releases and it drops and ends up slightly high, quite a lot higher really. I've got to double check that. We mustn't be too close, obviously it won't work properly, but they certainly will be greatly, touch will be greatly improved. The other thing I noticed about the hammers is that there are some that have been affected by damp. If we lift them nearly to right angles, you can see some are slower than others. Not too significant, but certainly we could lubricate here. You can change centre pins, but you don't need to. The roller's not too worn, and also the back check is not too worn here. That's the back check. So those are fine. The hammers are resting on this rail. They are at 47 millimeters as they should be. Sorry if I'm going a bit fast, but don't want to make the video too long. But it's resting on this rail. Normally that wouldn't be the case, so maybe the rail needs dropping slightly, so they're not resting on it. That's something we've got to decide. Now the hammers are very soft. I can get my finger into them, and I'm just wondering whether it's going to be okay just to reface these or whether we actually have to replace them. It's something I've got to decide really. Obviously it's safe if we replace them, but it's a lot more expensive because we have to change the hammers, we have to do all the re-regulate the whole action if we do that, but that's a decision we've got to make. I seem to have suffered with something, not quite sure what has caused the hammers to go like this, but again, obviously new hammers would look perfect. Hammers like this are going to devalue the piano because of their appearance, but I'm not really quite sure what's happened to them. So it does seem to have got damp in some respect. Some of the keys are a bit loose. This is B here. You can see the last one, and there's a bit on the loose side in the centre rail, so they could do with rebushing. The front probably doesn't need rebushing because you can take up the cricket bat. Sorry, I can't really illustrate that now, but there we are. That's cricket bat shaped, and you can turn it sideways to take up the slack. So rather than rebush those, that's probably going to be fine. So looking at the worksheet, it's a Bechstein Model L made in 1964. Mahogany, bright, polyester, but very faded and needs repolishing really. So there's the details of the piano. Leg room is reasonably good, and pedal height, which is over here, 5.5, so that's something you've mentioned before. If you're a tall person, you could put caster cups under and you'd be able to do that without the pedals being too high. Originally sold by Jake Samuel, it's down there. You can see Jake Samuel, and it says made in Germany underneath. Jake Samuel is one of the main London retailers of pianos and retailed a lot of Bechsteins. That hammer tone is very soft, and definitely I would like to do something with that. It's very soft around there. You can't get a punchy sound. Obviously you want a soft tone as well. The unicord is well adjusted, so that's giving you a nice soft tone, but you need a bit more dynamic range, shall we say, tonal range. The key dip's okay, and the hammer blow's correct, so the hammer rail that they rest on, hammer rest rail, that probably needs lowering a bit, I think, really. Dampers are good, well, just one I marked there that it's just slightly needing work on it. And regulation generally needs doing. It'll play much more sensitively if it's well regulated. If you want to try and play Moonlight Sonata, for instance, you can't really play it that quietly. You don't get enough, it's not sensitive enough. But C is much more sensitive than B. If I want to play B quietly, it's much more reliable playing C now that it's been regulated than B. That's pressing it to the same amount. and that's very reliable. So we really could regulate the piano, definitely. If it was our piano, would do that. And reweighing the keys, you can see the weight of the keys here varies. 63 is too high really. It should be more like 50, well, maximum 56, and 50, 48. 48 is sort of, if you're an occasional player, then 48 would be nice in the centre. The 61's far too high, so we need to reweight after we've perhaps refaced the hammers and lubricated it, and then we'll see. We may need to add weights to the keys. I hope that's been helpful. I'm going to have a quick listen to the piano. I'm not going to compare it with other pianos now, but it's an excellent piano, very well made. Bechstein Model Ls, we've restored them before, and the results are very pleasing. Just wanted to add for clarity that if the polyester is taken off, this is a sort of 2-pack plastic finish, if it's taken off, then the problem is it might have got into the grain too much to really do a good job French polishing it, and then in case it needs re-veneering, we can obviously choose what veneer you put on the piano too. So this is a very tasteful mahogany, and it'll come out slightly more contrasting and won't be so reflective, obviously, if it's French polished, and that will make it, I think, more pleasant to look at anyway. So that's the Bechstein Model L, made in 1974, 170 centimetres long. And then the bass is beautiful. For the length of the piano, it's a very pleasant bass indeed, the Bechsteins have. But round this area, it doesn't have enough dynamic range. It's quiet when you, as it were, it's too soft for the loud playing. And the hammers seem to have got damp, and whether they'll reface properly and we can get a nice round sound out of it, we probably can. Otherwise we've got to replace the hammers, which is something we can definitely guarantee will give a good sound. So I think we've got to try refacing them first, see what happens, and then replace them if necessary. Bit out of tune at the moment, needs pitch raising as well. Pitch raising will bring a bit of life into the piano as well, that will help. It should be a nice powerful piano as well as a very gentle piano, as it were, but played powerfully and gently. But at the moment it doesn't have enough control over it to really get control on the soft playing, and it's such a well-made piano with very good Renner action, so it could be one of the best pianos really. It is one of the best pianos. Bechstein actions are so good. Got an inspiring sound to it, so hopefully you can do all that work and make it into a really superb instrument. Thank you very much for listening. If you have a piano that you'd like us to assess with a view to restoring it, then please do write to us, info@robertspianos.com. Thank you very much.